it's the starting point of something. It's the impetus of the idea. It's the inflection point, like the spark that inspires it.
You're listening to Artistry with Heart, a musician's wellness podcast. I'm Stephanie Lynn Bernards. On today's episode, we're joined by tenor saxophonist Tristan Weitkamp, a jazz improviser, educator, and composer whose warmth and positivity shine both on stage and in the classroom. Tristan is currently the band director at Sherwood High School, where he also coordinates jazz ensemble activities across the district. He previously served as interim director of bands and visiting instructor of music at Portland State University, where he earned a Master of Music in Instrumental Conducting, a Master of Education, and a bachelor's degree in jazz studies. Tristan also completed a post-baccalaureate study in music and global affairs at the University of Cape Town, performing with South African musicians Diju Platkeys and Tony Cedrus, and recorded his debut album Flash in the Pan. Tristan now co-manages a big band with Nathaniel Ankeny, directs the Providence Hospital Stage Band, and founded Sherwood Summer Jazz, a summer jazz camp and festival in Oregon. Tristan, it's an honor to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you feeling today?
Good. So much happening these days. It's a lot.
Yeah, you're also a new parent, so
Yep.
it's like
We both know that journey a little bit. Yeah.
a whole thing trying to be a parent and also a musician and just like be a person. And yeah, I know we went to college at the same time at Portland State, and I've always noticed how much warmth and positivity you bring to every musical space that you're in. And I love how you are freely sharing your knowledge, making people feel safe in exploring their own improvisational voice for, kids and teenagers. And I just think that's so awesome what you're up to. I know a little bit about your background, but listeners really don't know anything about you. So let's just start at the beginning. Where did your musical journey begin?
Band at school, like so many wind instrument players. I joined the middle school band in 6th grade playing the clarinet and had a long journey getting to the point where I decided I wanted to study music in college, but a lot of people along the way that inspired me and shaped me and encouraged me. And so it was just kind of a part of the public school music education process that it's wonderful in the United States that we have that in the schools, and so many people get to experience music when they're young. You don't have to spend a lot of money for like a private music establishment. There are those too. Like in Portland, we have the Philharmonic for the youth Philharmonic and the MYS, which is like a string orchestra. They do jazz as well. I participated in some of those. We also have school music groups. Almost every school in the state of Oregon has some sort of music curriculum, instrumental and vocal and otherwise. And so I think that has become, something that I feel so passionately about maintaining and expanding and cultivating is public school music, because there's just so many kids that get access to it then during the day. I probably wouldn't have gotten that serious about playing an instrument if I wasn't doing it at school, or it became a social activity for me. And
Do you come from a musical family?
music appreciators, but I'm really kind of the first in my family to perform or treat it as a profession. And so it was alien to many members of my family that I wanted to go on that path, but they've been there for me. It's great. Yeah, so I think that like having that in the schools is so important. And it's also just like an incredible service that we have to our young people in the United States to treat music as part of their education, like a necessary, available addition.
Yeah, 100%. What early experiences in the public school system did you have that shaped your musical life? Was there a teacher or was there a moment?
Yeah,
or
there's teachers.
just friends?
Yeah, I think when I first started, it was all about like, okay, my friends are doing it, I'm going to do it. And then as I fell in love with it and I got better and I had rewarding experiences that shaped me as a person, I became like, of course, more passionate over time. It wasn't like I started playing clarinet in 6th grade and it's like, I'm going to do this for a living. And then performing opportunities and cool opportunities in high school started pushing me in that direction. I remember seeing concerts when I was young, and it just kind of like opened my eyes and blew my mind and inspired me. A really memorable one was when I was a freshman in high school. Daryl Grant, who's a Portland, and we both know Daryl Grant. He was part of the reason I wanted to go to Portland State. And I know part of your journey. He released an album Truth and Reconciliation and did a concert. And it was kind of happenstance that I heard about it, and my parents wanted to go. And it was like Brian Blade on drums and Esperanza Spalding at the age of 19 or 20, I think. Portland musician, went to Berkeley. She was in her education at that time, and she came back to play in that band, and then a bunch of other Portland like horn players and stuff. And I just remember seeing that, and I'd never seen jazz like that live, and it just like blew my mind. It was so inspiring. And I kind of followed Daryl all the way through high school. I would always try and go see him play, or be in touch when I started looking at colleges. Like, he was a touchstone, and he was at Portland State, and that's what drew me there originally. And then, you make those choices, and those things kind of go down that river stream, and it keeps going in that direction. You don't really know how you got where you got, but when you look back, you're like, oh, Daryl Grant, wow, that was a really important moment, I guess.
He was a huge part of my journey too. Really, really incredible person. I mean, everybody you listed, like Brian Blade, Daryl Grant, Esperanza Spalding, they're all just like such incredible musicians. But yeah,
That was an early one. That concert was a big deal early on for me.
Sheesh, yeah, I know. Yeah, Daryl has this way of kind of drawing people in and helping them reach their fullest potential and giving them opportunities they'd never expect to have. Like, when I got to meet Herbie Hancock, right? That was like so crazy because I grew up listening to him and I just was like, yeah, fangirling out hardcore. It was like such a cool opportunity. But yeah, I think there is something to be said for when you have that moment, you see music happening in such a beautifully powerful way. You're just like, oh my gosh, I want to be able to do this, or I want to at least be, yeah, I need to, yeah, my own version. But yeah, I love how like jazz specifically, but all improvisation is like truly this collaboration in the moment. So that's super, super cool. And I know, so you got your bachelor's and master's at Portland State, right?
Yeah. And they were separated. I did my bachelor's and the South African studies around the same time. I think I finished all that in like 2015, came back home, and I started teaching a lot because I knew I liked teaching. I liked being around young musicians, but it wasn't like that was the direction I was going to go to make a living at that time. I kind of fell into that over time. And compared to a lot of things, I would finish a day of teaching and I would feel energized by, I would feel like the cup was full. For me, it was like teaching like filled the cup. So that's how I kind of found that later on, and then went back and did my graduate studies after I'd kind of like had some teaching experience already. And so when I went back to my grad program, you kind of don't know as you're going through all those really critical classes that teach you things like, what is actually really going to be the thing that I have to hang my hat on every day in the classroom? What's going to keep me sane and like moving forward and like give me the tools I need to not just be a good teacher, but to like strike the balance and make it through the year. The year of teaching from September to June is like a grind. And there's seasons of it, and it's different if you're in middle school or high school or whatever. But there are seasons of it where you just like you're there all day, or like you can't get caught up no matter how much extra work you're putting in. And going into grad school, I was looking to figure that stuff out because I'd seen it happening to the people that I looked up to. And I knew that there were areas like, for example, like things that I didn't know that I needed to learn. But like I think a lot of young educators, like they go right into that teaching program and they don't have that perspective yet of like, what do I actually need to get out of this program? And so much of education, especially in college, is like you seeking out the knowledge. The curriculum is there as like a structure, but like you need to be like treasure collecting, like the stuff that you need. And I don't think we talk about that enough.
I think that's super insightful though. And I want to hear a little bit because I think that traveling adds a lot to kind of the depth of wisdom you can offer, just to others, but also to yourself. I bring this up because you studied in South Africa and you got your post back there and you recorded an album based off your experiences from there. And I just want to hear what about that experience shaped you today and anything you want to share about that experience when you were there, who you met that kind of like influenced some of the things that you were just talking about.
I mean, I decided at some point in my undergrad, I wanted to do study abroad. I think I did a short trip with the honors college group to Nicaragua for like spring break. And it was like 10 days. It was like something, a couple friends I knew were in honors college and went on it. And I tagged along. I wasn't really like planning on it, but I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. I'm going to go. And it was a study group that went to Nicaragua, did some service, but it was like, we were looking into like kind of economics and how the coffee industry is works in like different capacity, like fair trade versus not fair trade versus in some of the historical plantation. It was really neat. It was like a lot of things and no real specific aim other than to just examine what was going on there through like a sustainability lens. So it was a very open-ended like trip and the discussions we had. But it was really just a great opportunity to go with a bunch of other college students on this trip. And then I got back from that and I was like, I want to do that again. I want to spend more time somewhere. I want to live somewhere for a period of time, especially as a musician. Like when I went to Nicaragua, I was not playing an instrument. I did not take my saxophone with me. That was not why we were there. But in South Africa, that was the point. I finished my undergrad degree and I actually went and took classes in the South African College of Music and played in the jazz ensemble and took some world music classes. That was with Dizu. He taught the world music class that I took at. And so I met him because he was teaching at the university. I had decided to do that just because I just felt like spending more time somewhere and immersing yourself in the music industry as well as just like the travel, like what you see when you travel through a country is one version. And then when you're like, I'm going to go to college there. And all of a sudden I'm making these friends. They're having me play in their band. I'm going to their parents' house for dinner. It's a whole different thing, right? I was going to be there for 6 months, do the term. And then I decided to stay for the rest of the year. And so I stayed a full calendar year instead of 6 months. And that second half of that is when I was playing with a bunch of friends and I was kind of writing some music and I had some music I'd written before. And I just was like, I'm going to book a recording studio. I think it was like 4 or 5 days and just brought a bunch of people in. Some of the tracks on that record I don't even play on. 1 or 2 of them were like arrangements of mine of friends' tunes that they let me do that kind of thing too. And it's never made any money. It wasn't really about that. It was more like, my portfolio of what I did while I was there. It was like a timestamp or like a photograph of my musical self at that time. The recording session, I remember I had the thought, I'm like, I delayed my plane ticket and almost like 2 days later, I like called the recording studio and I was like, hey, what's your rate? And then I just put the date on the calendar and I'm like, here are the dates. Here's the timeline for when this is going to like be recorded, mixed, mastered, printed. Here's my release concert, and there's my plane ticket home. And I had that all mapped out. And then I'm like, oh, shoot, I got to write some stuff, because it gets that. If you're just composing kind of in a vacuum, it's really hard. The minute you have a date, things get done, right?
I think at a certain point, you do have to just take the plunge, I mean, you're never going to be quote ready. And I like that you called your record a timestamp, though, because my album with Sarka, I didn't really go into it with that mentality. I think that I put way too much pressure on it to be more than that. And I think if we could all kind of go into the recording studio, accepting that it is a timestamp of who you are in that moment, rather than this needs to be like my make or break moment, I think that it would free up a lot of headspace to just like let things happen the way that they're supposed to and loosen the expectation that just because, you're at a recording studio, everything that comes out of your horn has to be your magnum opus. Because every moment we are a different version of ourselves. And I love that like music is that representation of us in that moment, So I'm going to kind of use that because I think that it's better to think about every creation as a timestamp rather than like, this is going to be the thing that makes me,
It never works like
it never
that
works
way.
like that.
Yeah, that intention doesn't do anything for music.
Yeah. Well, I learned that the hard way. Something I think about is that I'm like, I listen back and I'm like, you know what? That was actually a perfect representation of where I was at that time, but I would really actually love to go back and record it again so that I could actually just claim my name with these songs, and see what comes out like that's new versus like who I was 7 years ago, because they probably sound like completely different pieces now. So I don't know. You said you wanted to record a new album, so maybe you do Flash in the Pan
2.0. Well, it's funny, the title, like I picked that title for, I don't even remember why, but Flash in the Pan is like, it comes from like old muskets where it's like there's a pan and there's gunpowder and the minute it burns, it's just gone. Right. And there's this old saying of like, well, that was a flash in the pan. Like it's just, it happened and it's gone. And I felt like in some ways, like that was going to be my whole experience in South Africa if I didn't record. So it's kind of a joke to myself. Like I'm going to call it this because now it's not. I mean, I put my name on there as the composer with whoever, because I helped like make the arrangement that ended up on there. But like, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, some of those things, they didn't really feel like they came from me. They came from me in the sense that I took these musicians that I'd been playing with in South Africa. Many of them hadn't played with each other. They came from different bands I was playing in or friends I met from school and then connecting them with this other person. And that's my favorite thing to do is like, you two do something together. Like, you really should, like, and it sometimes, like, that spark happens, and that's like, it makes me so happy. So that album was a lot of that. It was like, I'm gonna take this vocalist who I just adore and admire as a person, as an artist, as everything. And I'm gonna put them with this band doing this tune that I think would, like, work. And so, like, there's a really nice Down in the River to Pray, Zoe Madija on vocals. It's gorgeous.
Oh, brothers, let's go down. Let's go down. Oh, come on down. Oh, brothers, let's go down. Down in the river to pray.
And that's Dizu playing, like, this flute. This flute is not a flute like you would imagine. It's a piece of black plastic irrigation pipe with no holes in it. And he would cut it like at an angle and, like, whistle through it, and then use the overtone series. And then on the other end of the flute, you'd open and close, like, the one opening, right? The other end of the pipe. And by switching from back pressure to open, it would, like, do it basically was two different overtone series. And you hear him play this, and it's like, wow, that like, what is that flute? And it sounds gorgeous. It's literally like a $2 piece of pipe, probably cheaper, like 50 cents piece of black pipe. And he's so musical. And so that's kind of layered over her singing this really soulful melody with, again, like, very modern jazz reharmonized kind of changes under it. I still listen to that, and I'm like, that's really cool. And all I really did was, like, take the melody and write some chords to it. And, like, I don't even think I play on that track. It captivates me every time I hear it.
It gets to the point that I wanted to talk about later, which is that there's this expectation that we're supposed to play in a certain fashion in order to be relevant. Stretching boundaries is part of what composition is. And I think that if we can kind of just catch, at least myself, when I'm like, I should do this better again, or this should sound like someone else, then I'm honestly, like, in that kind of slippery slope of what I honestly am trying to get out of and help other people get out of. And maybe some people want to think that's a cop out, but all of the greats kind of gave a big FU to, like, all the people who told them they were supposed to be like everybody else. And maybe it's just my projection, but it can feel like you're supposed to be something you're not. And I feel like that's exactly why jazz was created, is to not be something that you're not. It's double negative.
As you bring it back to education, like, that is one of the things that is really challenging about trying to teach music in any capacity, is, like, here are the expectations of what you should be able to do and how we want you to do it. There's a certain amount of that's necessary, and every musician should strive to be able to codify what they're trying to learn to do. And as an educator, you feel like you see somebody and they're on their journey, and your job is to help them get better or help them notice what they're missing. And so much of that process now becomes, how can I codify something that they need to know to put it in a curriculum that they can understand? You're trying to help anybody who wants to be able to do that thing understand how to break down the process of learning to do that thing. And by so doing that, you are turning the organic process into something that's not organic anymore. And I think the best teachers I see strike a really nice balance of, like, yeah, you need to be able to do that, and you need to be able to do it this way. But how can you figure out how to do that? Or, if this is what you're trying to do, how can we practice to get to that point? Because I think so much of teaching music is actually teaching somebody how to practice. I can't sit next to you and teach you how to play a 2-5-1 progression a bazillion ways and get to the point where you can play it as an expression of yourself. Like, you have to put in the time of understanding all of the stuff you want to play to the point where, like, you can finally express yourself, and it becomes this organic creation process, which makes jazz so exciting for people. You have to just kind of free yourself from all those constraints. But we focus so much, I think, as educators, to a fault, and I'm speaking in a very general sense at this point, but, like, on the technical process of developing a skill versus the process of practicing and how to refine a practice and develop a style and develop a voice over time. And, not everybody's ready for that part of the education if they can't do the technical still. But I remember so much of my undergrad studies, and I had a lot of deficiencies in my technical ability on the saxophone that we were trying to address. It was really hard to ever get past that point with things like playing the saxophone. But I remember like arranging class. It was just such an exploratory, like, what's a different way we could write that phrase? What's oh, wow. Oh, let's break the rules, like, and it was such a different process that I really gravitated to that at the end of my education. I was like, I can write. I'm not the best saxophone player in the world, that's for sure. But I can, and I really enjoy writing because,
Nor should you be. I
well,
think that's
yeah,
not the point.
it's not the point. But I understand why the edifice of education falls in that trap so much. And us as educators fall in that trap over and over and over and over again. And it happens to me in the high school classroom. I'm in a much different role than a college jazz ed professor, right? Like some of the students are there and they're like ready for that. I want a jazz education and I'm still in high school. And then some of the students are there and they're like, I'm in this class because my friends play jazz and I barely practice, right? It's a social experience. And they both deserve my education. And they both deserve, the talented kids who are just there with their friends, if they did great in the audition, they deserve just the same amount of education, I think, as anyone else. And that's the beauty of that public school classroom and jazz education. I can still be like, we're going to get good. We're all going to work hard. But like framing it in a way of like, here's how you need to approach practicing this art form so that you can actually do the justice of like playing it.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a little bit like here are the rules so that you can break them eventually. I think that as an educator myself, it's definitely that mentality of like, here's what you need to do in order to create. And I think that what's interesting is that it is like you need to learn how to write so that you can then write your own version of poetry, right? Like, there's so many things to be said for finding your own voice. And I also think it's very important to learn, the semantics, right? I'm curious what teaching has revealed to you about yourself as a musician and as a person.
What I've realized over the years is that teaching music is like a giant mirror. I'll get done with a class and some classes go great and some are horrible. And there's like this season and like all this stuff. But like all the time I'm checking myself and I love that about it. I feel like I need that almost in my life to continue to grow. It helps me continue to be a student because I'm a teacher. I had a friend once say this and it stuck with me, so I use it a lot. But if I wasn't teaching music, I'd probably be teaching something else. I'm a teacher. I'm a musician, but like I'm teaching music because I really need to be a teacher. And music is my domain. I feel like the classroom and the students and everything is the right place for me. And I get to do music every day of my life. And it is a living.
Yeah, I think that we are all teachers and we are all teaching people all the time. And I think this whole concept of teaching being your mirror, because every person receives information in a different way, come in with a different emotional landscape. They come in with different baggage and traumas and stories. They come in with different capabilities. And you're also coming to the table with new information too. And you daily, at least I find, I have to admit that I don't know everything and that I don't have the answers to everything. So it does really keep you on your edge. So I love that.
I don't have a canned curriculum that I'm handing out. I'm always looking for new things. I think that's beautiful about teaching music is like whatever the repertoire that I pick, that's now the study that we're all on. To this point in my career, I have rarely repeated teaching a song to the jazz band. I am always looking for new stuff, mostly to keep myself interested, actually, but also just because there's so much to play. And as long as I can put together a nice set that the kids like playing and that the audience is going to love, and it's varied enough, I'm not going to recycle stuff. I know teachers, and it's not to a fault. It's just their style, what they do. But like, they kind of teach on a 2-year rotation of literature. Or maybe even like there's that song they do every year. There's stuff we have to do every year. We have to play the high school fight song every year, but like the Star Spangled Banner and all our pep music and certain things. But when it comes to like what my jazz band's playing at the concert tomorrow night, it's completely different than what we played.
This podcast is about helping musicians get tapped into community and resources so that they can continue to walk the creative, artistic, musical path that they're meant to walk. And we know that is going to look differently for every single person. Since you are mostly in the jazz and improvising world, I just was curious if you wouldn't mind sharing about challenges or roadblocks that have gotten in your way as you've journeyed on this path of improvisation and finding your own voice. I feel like there's this differentiation, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, between like the genre of jazz and improvising. And I could speak to my own challenges, but I would like to hear from you whether you want to wear the hat of jazz musician, improviser, wherever wherever you're at, I just would love to hear any challenges maybe that you've faced along your journey that you'd be willing to open up about.
My biggest challenge is always myself. We go after ourselves with like the most, I think, ferocious criticism that we have. At least I think most human beings. And anything that's, coming from that, whether it's, aggression or self-defeatism or low self-esteem, it's all just coming from the fact that like we want to be doing things well. And I kind of like I try to remind my students in the classroom, I'm like, we all want to be good at this. Nobody showed up to be bad at this, and all the bands that we're going to go see at the festival next week, like none of them are trying to be bad, like everybody's just in where they are. I think that's useful to remind ourselves and also to remind each other occasionally is like, nobody's trying to be bad at this. Like,
And
I don't
maybe
know.
maybe no one is bad. I
And
mean, how do you
yeah, I
define
think,
bad? How do you define
and
bad?
I live so much in the world of like high school jazz
Right.
competitions.
Oh
And
God, that's
I
suffocating.
It can be. It can be. One of the hardest things for me as a teacher has been trying to navigate that. Like, I need to take my kids to these things. I think there's value in them. My group has done really well competitively, and that's worth celebrating. And then there's also the me that is like a week before the competition, I have to check myself every day. Like, am I becoming a teacher that I don't want to be because the competition is next week? That's really easy to start falling into. And oh, I'm like happy-go-lucky Mr. Weitkamp, and I'm, oh, we're having a great time learning jazz at the beginning of the year, and then all of a sudden, like the me a week before the competition is like, we need to learn our notes, and very different energy, and the kids don't deserve me like being a turncoat in that sense. Like I need to be me and be consistent, and the message needs to stay the same, and we're always working on getting better because that's part of the journey. But like we're not doing it all of a sudden because we want to get a higher score. And I think it's similar. It's like when we go into the studio with our album or we have a gig next week, we're playing with, great friends and musicians and there's audience there, like what is the lens that we're looking through and what is the mirror that we're looking in? Because you can kind of define that mental mantra of like while you're practicing what's going through your head. I strive for nothing, like trying to practice and not think about things while I'm practicing, but my mind doesn't really do that much. So I'm constantly like running a scroll, self-criticism. And then I have to stop and I have to be like, okay, not helping. Okay, what's something else I can think about while I'm doing my scales or whatever? And I think so for me, it's that internal monologue and it's that worst best critic, best worst critic running. And then, as a teacher, the competitive aspect is the thing I constantly have to like check on.
Give us an example of a voice and then give us an example of how you respond.
The proverbial they aren't going to like this. And they is like the college professors that I disagreed with and like, the people who didn't believe in me. That random person with the sunglasses on in the jazz club who's looking at you sideways. Like they, like who the hell cares about they? If I'm trying to make an album, like nobody's going to buy this. They don't matter. It's you and your art. And if it's good to you, it's going to be good for everybody else. And I kind of love that. The audience isn't why you're doing this. And that's so true. It's so true. If it's good for you, it's going to be good for everybody else in terms of art. It's got to come from the artist.
Totally. No, I appreciate you being willing to say that. I thought it could be kind of interesting to improvise together here for a second and then reflect on what comes up mentally for us. So, do you want to jam on like a B-flat blues for like a few minutes and just see? Okay. All right. Count us off at a tempo that you would like. How did that feel?
It always feels good to play some swing.
I know, it actually was really fun. I feel like that I always get kind of like, jittery, but then I like settle in and it feels good. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. What's the quote? The first chorus is for the audience. Every other chorus is for you. Is that a Ray Brown quote? I think that's a Ray Brown quote. But it's like the first chorus is like grab the attention. It's like kind of the salesy pitch of it, right? Like, grab everybody and pull them in. But really, I think it's actually the first chorus is like find it, and then everything else is just like let it go and just the flow start to happen. But it's like, yeah, those things like pop into my head, like how would this person perceive that thing I just played? And like I really have to shut that down because that just
Definitely. Mine is very much like, you don't know what you're doing.
oh
Like, that's the voice
no.
that's like, you don't know what to play. And that bass line is just, you are just faking it. Settle in and just like feel your body and feel the keys and try to hear the beat. And I think what's helpful in that moment for me was just to be like, it's just you and the music and Tristan and getting curious about where the thoughts come from and then being willing to release them. Because, like you said, it's not helpful. And I think that it's really important just to like thank them and maybe even thank them that you want the opposite. It's like maybe like, thank you for reminding me that I don't want to worry what other people think of me. Thank you for the reminder that like whatever happened in this moment is exactly what it's supposed to be. I just feel like I've wasted so much energy worrying about what other people think of me and worrying about how they think I play and worrying if I'm a valid musician or not. And like, so much energy has gotten eaten up by that. And I just want that voice to just quiet down so I can do my job. And I just know so many people can relate to that narrative. And I also think that many people have kind of gotten a grip with it. And I continue to work on that. And I think the best thing we can all do is just to recognize that maybe it's not ours. It's just kind of like this collective unconscious garbage that we can just like accept and let go and then get back to the music already.
Yeah. The music's there. It
Yeah.
wants us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wants us. So anyway, thanks for doing that experiment with me. We just have a few more minutes here, and I just wanted to get to your awesome original impetus. And you touched on it a little bit earlier. And you chose to share this piece, and listeners will get to hear it in full at the end of this episode. So, what does this piece represent to you now as compared to when you wrote it?
I remember playing modal music when I was in high school. It was like kind of the first thing I felt really comfortable improvising on because there's only two sounds that you need to worry about, the one scale and then the next scale. I felt comfortable playing over that. So I wanted to go back to it in that composition class. I was like, because I didn't want to think about a bunch of functional harmony I had to like compose lines to. And I also really love Eddie Harris. And what if I wrote like a freedom jazz dance-esque melody that fit over the changes to So What? And so that was like the impetus of that idea. And then I don't remember why I picked the word impetus, but I think it was just a cool word that popped out to me. Jazz musicians naming songs, it's so funny. There's no lyrics, so you could really name it. It could be named Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, right? Like, but that has a lyric. There's a point to that. It's the starting point of something. It's the impetus of the idea. It's the push down the hill. It's you have potential energy, and then there's the impetus is what sets it off, right? It's the ignition. It's the inflection point, but inflection point implies there's momentum already happening. Like it's really like some sort of potential energy is released or started. And so the impetus of an idea is like the spark that inspires it. It was definitely one of my first compositions, first original melodies. I'd done arranging up to that point, but I remember like specifically like I needed some way to get into composition because I remember thinking like, oh, composers are like born with a gift. Because of Mozart and Beethoven, all these people, you seem like, oh, Mozart was born with a gift. And now nobody else can be a composer, right? Like unless they're born with a gift, which really is just I'm watching my 2-year-old like constantly compose. And I'm like, so we are all born with a gift. Like everybody starts with that kind of childish energy, which is the root of composition. Like she doesn't have the contexts and the framework, but like my compositions happen best when I am like almost asleep because the rest of my brain shuts off and I can actually just go back to that child exploratory curiosity that is the root of all composition.
That's cool. Well, Tristan, this is awesome. How can people best connect with you and get in touch with your work?
My school district email. Sherwood
Okay.
School District. I have accounts. I'll tell you right now, I'm probably not going to see it if you send me something on Instagram.
Do you have an email people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, maybe you can link it in the episode.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So people can reach out to you on your email, and then do you have
Yep.
a Bandcamp with Flash in the Pan, or how can people hear your
It's
album?
on Bandcamp.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up there. Flash in the Pan, Tristan Weitkamp, Bandcamp. It'll continue to be on Bandcamp. Amazing company, by the way. Great, so great for artists.
Yeah, I love Bandcamp.
Bandcamp
Thanks,
is
Bandcamp.
you're the best. Not sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, I know, but maybe one day. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for your work, though, seriously, because musicians deserve to make money making music. So, okay, well, listeners, definitely check out Tristan's album, Flash in the Pan, on Bandcamp, and also get in touch with him via the email that I'll link in the notes.
Yeah. And then there's the Providence Hospital Stage Band, which I'm connecting now. It's just like a community jazz orchestra. They're great. So if you need a big band to come play at something, like an event or whatever, it's a great band for that. Wonderful human beings in that. I just started directing that about a year ago. And it's actually a lot of retired medical professionals, which is kind of fun. It used to be attached to the Providence Hospital system, and it would actually rehearse at the Providence Hospital. But they've since, moved to another location. So we're kind of self-sustaining now. But it's a great band with a lot of history. And then Nathaniel Ankeny and I, Nathaniel Ankeny's the saxophone professor at George Fox University, jazz professor. We have a band in Sherwood that's mostly music educators, some pros, and we're going to play at the Sherwood Summer Jazz Festival, an event that I started last year. It's in its second year now, and it's looking really great. Like, it's growing. We're going to have a professional jazz festival in downtown Sherwood with 3 ticketed evening concerts and clubs around town. And this will be really new and really exciting for Sherwood, Oregon, which
sounds like you're up to all kinds of cool stuff. Well, we'll be sure to link that all in the newsletter and make sure that we put those links in the show notes. And yeah, everybody check out all the awesome stuff that Tristan is a part of and playing in and starting and helping other people get involved in. It's so great. That's what music's all about, right? Community. Well, to our listeners out there, if something resonated with you today and you'd like to go deeper, definitely say hey or join us on Patreon, where we can go deeper with a journal prompt that's directly inspired by the conversation that Tristan and I had today. You'll also be able to find musicians' wellness resources on my website, stephaniebernards.org, where you can find all kinds of different things to help you on your path, whether it's yoga for musicians or whether it's different forms of therapy or just you name it. We're here for you. We want you to thrive with your own unique, authentic musical voice. So we're here for you. Drop us a line. Let us know what you thought about the show. Well, until next time, be you and stay inspired. And now here's the full version of Impetus.